Hey guys, Brent Porcio, TopVelocity.net. I'm going to do this video on drive leg styles. I've talked about this in the past. I just wanted to update you on more information around how to analyze pitchers and understand how they're using their lower half. So this is if you're going to be looking at high-level pitchers, you're going to see different variations of or different mechanics of pitchers using the lower half. Now, before we get started, I have a lot of people asking me about these mounds. These are called the Athlon's mounds. They custom design them. They're all on these pieces. Really, really sturdy, professional, high-end mounds. They have these clay inserts that pack extremely well because it uses a polymer. So you don't have to like put any water on it. You just put it back in, pack it down, and it really, it's almost like pitching on a big league mound. So it gives you the feel of being on dirt, indoors or wherever. You can put them anywhere. So if you want to know what these were, these are the Athlon's mounds. Big fan of them. Check them out. All right, so drive leg styles. Here at Top Velocity, we developed the method of 3x pitching. That's triple extension pitching. It's the foundation of our approach and how we use the kinetic chain. You're going to see in our methods, guys are working to implement triple extension. It's just such an elite move. It's something that you hope you can achieve. If not, you're going to get as close as you can. So what is triple extension? That's the extension of the ankle, the knee, and then the hip flexor. That means there has to be some rotation to extend that hip flexor. This isn't triple extension. That's just ankle, knee. This isn't really extending. It's when we open front foot and we move into rotation and then we power through triple extension into rotation and we push into ankle, knee, and then all of a sudden as that hip rotates, the hip extends. That's triple extension. That means you've extended the musculature in the calf, the ham and quad, the glute, and the hip flexor. So you have used some of the most powerful muscles in the body to create force towards your target. That's priceless when it comes to developing velocity. But like I said, even if I don't know what triple extension is and I'm trying to create as much force in that direction, you're trying to implement triple extension. We talk about how to get to triple extension, you have to get to triple flexion. That's flexing ankle, knee, hip flexor, and then timing the movement specifically into rotation and implementing full triple extension. So what happens is you're going to see pitchers that some of them will take a completely different approach. And the completely different approach really would only be the drive leg style we would call a rotational style. So if I say you're very rotational in your lower half, it's more than likely you're not implementing much ankle and knee extension. You're just trying to keep your weight back and swivel on the leg. So like hitters will call it squish the bug, right? You're just trying to keep your weight back and then turn it over, because turning the femur into internal rotation opens the hip. So it gives you that hip rotation that you need. There's two really opportunities to build energy or ways to build energy in the delivery, and that's through rotation and that's through extension or through linear movement. Ideally, we want to use both as best as we can, and rotation wouldn't be using both. So the rotators are ultimately the ones that are leaving a lot on the table, okay? Why would someone rotate? Probably because they're having a hard time getting their hips open when they extend or they move too quickly down the mound. So they just focus really hard on turning the femur over and getting the hips open. So there could be some issues with hip mobility. You'll see a lot of guys that can't extend their hips. There's a lot of pitchers that can't extend their hips. It's so tight. They're not going, and they go to try to push through something like that and they get stuck, and then their femur never comes around, their hips never rotate, and then they're in a bad place. They're pulling glove side. So those guys are finding more benefit of just sitting and turning. I'm just a guy here where if you have a restriction or an issue, I want to fix that so we can use the kinetic chain optimally. I don't want to try to not use the kinetic chain optimally and try to work around my restrictions. I understand if you're in season, you have to do it that way, but that's not how I want to develop an elite pitcher. So that's why a rotational guy, I'm going to hopefully work to get him to and build more linear power. Next drive leg style would be before we get to triple extension, because that's going to be our third drive leg style. next one would be, we call knee slammers, okay? So this is guys that they will extend the knee, but not engage the lower leg, right? So what happens is they extend the knee and their adductors fire, right? And they drag their back leg. And it doesn't really, because there's not rotation, it doesn't really open their hips. But it really powers a lot of force into their front leg, which that's that linear force. So that would actually be a more linear drive leg style. And the last one we're going to talk about would be a hybrid, a connection of them both. So rotation is a rotational style. Knee slamming, because you're seeing the knee just wanting to slam to the ground, that would be a more purely linear movement. Now triple extension, the last one, is going to be a combination of both. But with knee slammers, and the problem with knee slammers is they typically put a lot of wear and tear on their groins, their knees, their front labrum, because the hip's not rotating, and they're pushing so much force, so it's slamming a lot of force into their front labrum. So they have a lot of those issues, but they can throw very hard. The reason they're not engaging the lower leg, the reason there's not rotation in the femur, more adduction in the femur, like this, is because they probably have some abduction restriction. They have a hard time probably pulling their femurs up, doing a split. So what happens is as they move down the mound, they hit into range in their hip, and then their femur wants to collapse down like this. So instead of just letting it collapse and losing all that power, they just accelerate through it, right? When they feel that want to collapse, they just push through it. So it's usually linked to some abduction restriction in the hip musculature, or also the hip extension restriction. Typically those guys have some really tight hips, and they're just trying to keep their power without having their hips swivel and rotate and do all the things it needs to do. Okay, so that would be the second one, would be the knee slammers. The final is triple extension, and we already talked about it. The ability to extend and create the linear force into rotation, where the front foot is opening into that drive, the hip is extending, that's maximum power. So the reason this one is so effective and optimal is because it's going to move you closer to the hitter. So you're going to pick up perceived velocity because you're moving closer to the hitter. It's maximizing power in through rotation, so you're going to get maximum energy, and it's going to open your hips and allow you to sequence the kinetic chain with that energy. So it's what we're all trying to do. We're all trying to be triple extenders. Doesn't matter who you are. It's just the ones that get restricted and stuck, they start searching for other ways to create a lot of the lower half energy and sequencing, and they fall into those other patterns. But at the end of the day, every pitcher wants to be a triple extender or use triple extension. It's just they're restricted in their means to do that. Now, if you see a pitcher who it's just not that aggressive, it's just kind of like this, and they're throwing, that's a guy who has another gear, and he's in a low gear. And a lot of guys can go all into the bigs in a low gear. Those are the guys actually going to last longer if they're still sequencing their kinetic chain. Some guys will go into low gear and overwork their arm. That's not going to work. But if you see a guy that's just not aggressive with it, then that's a guy who's in a low gear. And ultimately, if you brought him up to higher gear, you're going to see all that extension power and rotation in the movement, bringing them to a high gear. So go watch some film, guys. Go watch some footage of pitchers and try to identify what they are. Are they rotators? Are they knee slammers? Or are they triple extenders? At the end of the day, the better you can implement number 3, triple extension, the more optimal your lower half's going to be in increasing velocity and reducing stress to the arm. If you have any questions, put it below. Love to hear your questions.